Do you love minicrits? Do you love the idea of doing bonus damage from behind? Are you interested in being able to one-shot snipers as Scout? If you said yes to any of the following, I have the guide for you. How yinz doing? I'm Ian, and this is my TF2 How to Killstreak series, where we look at the best and worst TF2 has to offer and I show you how to get a killstreak with it, because everything is a bad idea until it works. Today, as you could tell by reading the title of this video, we'll be covering the backscatter, so without further ado, let's get into it. The backscatter is an unlockable primary weapon for the Scout in Team Fortress 2 that can be crafted by combining a reclaimed metal, a shortstop, and a criticola in a crafting menu. However, like always, I recommend either trading or waiting for a random drop if you wish to acquire this weapon for yourself. As for what this weapon does, it gives you guaranteed mini-crits when you're shooting your opponents from behind, at the cost of your clip size being reduced by 2 shots relative to stock, as well as the spread of your bullets being increased by 20%. This increased mini-crit damage means you can theoretically kill light classes in one clean hit. However, with the spread of your shots being increased significantly with this weapon, you would have to be at point-blank range in order to do that reliably. This is because the reduced accuracy of the backscatter effectively means that your bullets spread out over a wider area relative to stock. This results in the number of bullets actually connecting with your intended target outside of point-blank range being reduced overall, which cuts into your overall damage as well. This means while you do technically get a damage boost when using this weapon by shooting people from behind, the amount of extra damage you're actually doing doesn't toss you over any damage thresholds 9 times out of 10. And some of you might be thinking, well, okay, so I'm not doing better damage at long range, but if I can kill people consistently at point blank range with this weapon, I can actually reload less and be more effective.
Ha! No!
The problem with that is that your clip size is also reduced, meaning you're going to have to be reloading just as often as you would be with a stock if you're using this weapon as intended. And that is the issue this weapon has to deal with. Not only is its only beneficial trait completely invalidated if your opponent is facing you when you shoot at them, but the downsides effectively mean even when you're in situations where the beneficial trait is working as intended, you're only going to be just as good as someone using stock effectively. So unless your end goal is just to get that dopamine rush from getting mini-crits from behind on opponents, you're better off just using stock and hoping for a random crit than actually using the backscatter the majority of the time. However, we came here to killstreak with this thing, and by God, that's what we're going to do, even if we have objectively better options. After all, I've done videos on the Righteous Bison and the Gas Passer, because if a weapon had to actually be good in order for me to give it its own episode, we would have ended this series a long time ago. Moving back to the subject of actually getting kills with this gun, as a lazy man once said, a gun is a gun. So I don't care if you're behind them or not, just shoot them until you murder them to death. 4 shots in your clip isn't as much as I'd like, but neither is 6, so we'll make do with what we got rather than beg for scraps. When it comes to what weapons you want to use alongside the backscatter, there are 2 trains of thought to work with. Increasing your mobility with weapons like the Atomizer or Winger to increase your flanking potential, or improve your survivability with weapons like the Mad Milk or Pocket Boy's pistol. Personally, I advise mixing and matching the 2 schools of thought together, having one weapon slot aside from your primary dedicated to improving your flanking potential, while having the other focused on improving your ability to stay alive. If you like using the Winger to improve your jump height in order to flank the enemy, but are having trouble with pyros, the Sun on a Stick is a viable alternative to the Mad Milk. However, if there are no pyros on the server whatsoever, I advise against using this weapon altogether. However, to be frank, when it comes to secondary and melee options, the Scout has very few bad options. In fact, the only weapons I would wholesale say not to use whatsoever would be the Fan of War and Criticola. This is because their whole thing is giving you guaranteed mini-crits on demand at a certain cost. Something the backscatter does on its own, making these 3 weapons somewhat redundant with one another. Not as bad as the gunboats and rocket jumper, but still, not exactly an ideal combination. I mentioned earlier you can technically one-shot light classes. However, this mostly just means snipers, since other scouts tend to face the guy that's killing them. Engineers will almost always be inside their sentry nest unless they're using a gunslinger, which gives them an increase to health, putting them outside of what the one-shot range of this weapon actually is. And spies can pull off all sorts of shenanigans with the Dead Ringer and their other watches in order to make sure that they're effectively impossible to kill in the first place. The only other target in the game you can theoretically kill at full HP is a Vitasaw Medic. However, the Vitasaw is not exactly a popular weapon for medics to use in casual servers. As a result, you will pretty much never be able to benefit from this particular combination. So while you can't one-shot the majority of medics you'll see in a casual game, you can still kill just about any medic that isn't at full health, since the difference between a Vitasaw medic and every other medic is literally 10 HP. And that's not a high bar to cross. A spy miss a backstab and butter knife him in the face instead? Finish the job for him. Soldier miss a direct hit but do some decent splash damage, sending that sexy German meat flying at high velocity to you? Shoot that bad boy up with your cock-shaped lighter. Sniper tried to no-scope headshot the medic but failed and no-scope body shot them instead? Give them a participation medal in the form of an assist kill in the kill feed. All in all, I give the backscatter a disappointing out of 10. Personally, I would change the negative drawbacks of this weapon to increase reload and holster time rather than its current allocation. However, to be perfectly honest with you, all this weapon really needs is to have one or both of its downsides swapped out with something else entirely in order to become viable at whatsoever on a casual level. Given Valve's nature as a company, I generally don't like the idea of talking about balance changes to weapons since they pretty much never happen for the most part. However, with this weapon I've made an exception since it could so easily be fixed with such little effort. Unlike many other bad weapons I have covered in the past which would need drastic overhauls in order to become viable. Although, to be perfectly honest, this weapon truly isn't all that bad, it's just outclassed by all of your other options for the most part. I said for the most part. However, that will be all for now. Like the video if you did, subscribe if you don't want to miss the next one, comment what weapons you want to see me cover in the future, and if you really want to have a say on what weapons I cover going forward, I recommend checking out my community section here on this channel where I host polls that decide what weapon I cover next after I finish the one I'm currently working on. Speaking of which, let's go over the results of the last one. With 115 of you guys voting on what weapon I cover next, and the winner being decided by a 38% majority, the weapon for the next video is... the Diamondback. I'll be honest, looking at the results, I honestly thought the Engineer Melee video was gonna do better. Like, I knew it wasn't necessarily going to win, but come on, I thought it would do better than 20%. But yeah, looks like the next video is gonna be about Spy's scummiest weapon in his arsenal, so stay tuned for that.